And now, at long last, the promised sermons, actually reflections on journeys toward humanism. We will have Trude Diamond, Mark Brandt, and finally, Bill Norsworthy. Trude?
Thank you, Ray. Good morning, everybody. I'm Trude Diamond. My pronouns are, when I'm in this environment, we and our. The first question I was given when asked to speak today was, how does humanism affect your life? And my answer is focus. During my entirely secular youth, family practices of secular or cultural Judaism involved traditional meals, rarely with accompanying prayers, unless we were at Orthodox religious friends' homes. We attended synagogue only for life passage events. Me, though, I was not bat mitzvahed. Rabbi didn't answer my question one time. My question was, well, Rabbi, since men offer a prayer of gratitude every morning to have not been born a woman, what do the women pray in perfect Hebrew to express their gratitude that we have not been born a man? And the rabbi said, how has your mother raised you? And smart-ass little girl, 10 years old, said, to be a student. At school, my teachers answer questions, and rabbi means teacher. So if you're not the one, you're not the other. And he called my mother to come to Hebrew school and pick me up, and she did, and then she agreed. There were better ways to spend my time. I was 10. I forgot the Hebrew since then, but I have not forgotten the lesson that I taught myself about the practitioners, the authoritarian practitioners of religion, if not necessarily religion itself. So I went through some decades of seeking other religions and exploring, and if I had discovered Unitarian Universalism back then, I would have probably been a Unitarian Universalist for 50 years now. But as it is, only about 20. But in all the years since I was 10, everything I know of mainstream religions convinced me that they're divisive, territorial superstitions, originating as crowd control, when migratory tribes coalesced into more stationary civic groups whose theocratic leaders interpreted, and still interpreted, their divinely dictated laws in whatever way they served and enriched the established power structure, usually all male, sometimes not. That was the 1960s. And since then, nothing has changed my mind. I think men made the religions and invented God. God didn't create us. I studied in college the Old and New Testaments as literature. Didn't change my mind any about the religious dogmatic interpretations of them. And in the 60s, given that I was female and feminism was on the rise, I interpreted one of Gloria Steinem's quips as, a woman without a God is like a fish without a hook in its mouth. That was before I'd studied enough physics to understand the search for successful grand unified theory for particle and quantum physics, the GUT, not the GOD. And I'll believe in the gut when scientists formulate a workable quantum field theory of gravity based on the exchange of a hypothesized gravitron. Till then, it's all kind of quirky to me. But I couldn't resist that. And God has not stricken me with a bolt of lightning for it. But sometimes I think I sense neutrinos tickling me as they whiz through my physical mass, as they're doing through all of ours right now. And that keeps me humble. To neutrinos, I'm just another brick in the wall. Back down to earth, I also grew up gardening with my mother and developed a healthy reverence for all aspects of nature. My studies of the sciences and nature metaphors and the arts deepened that reverence. Wiccans usually think I'm Wiccan, and I do share their reverence for nature, if not all of their rituals honoring it, although I do respect the earthworms as they nourish my plants. But I do end such prayers that I do pray with, for the good of all and according to free will. And it was Wiccan practices and the need for a community that was not political party affiliated, but engaged in social justice action that brought me to a UU congregation in Tampa, and then to UUC a few years later, just as UUC's humanist group formed. And here I am. How does focus come into that equation? The study of humanism as a concept within atheism focuses my daily attention on people. Believers in God ask, well, if you don't believe in God, what do you believe in? And I answer, you. It's hard for them to argue with that, because it's kind of affirming. I say, you, us, everybody. And I've observed that I'm no more often confused by human actions than you are by God's actions. The difference is I can talk directly with people, and they'll tell me what they think and why they're doing whatever it is. Or sometimes they lie, but you know. And we can have a conversation about it in any case, and I may not like what they tell me all the time, but I can engage with them in a shared existence. And we do have common trials and satisfactions of that human existence, and we learn from each other's experiences of that existence. That focus on people fits in naturally with my reverence for nature, because we're part of nature. Nature is complicated. We're complicated. Nature's composed of atoms. So are we. Nature can disappoint and elate us, and we can disappoint and elate each other. Reverence for nature made me study the natural sciences, though I turned out not to be brilliant at those. Reverence for people made me study psychology, which I turned out to have a knack for. Sure, what I know about people's psychology that underpins their worldviews and behaviors sometimes grieves me. It makes me practice diplomacy, though I stumble at that some of the time. A skill that is not natural to me, as that rabbi discovered. But sometimes it makes me love people, and it always lets me understand them. So whatever my understanding of people's behavior is, including my own, which sometimes mystifies me as well, I always know we are all the same kind of natural phenomenon. And that is what I focus on. And now for something completely different, Mark Brandt.
Trude's a tough act to follow here. I'm a slow learner, and the road to a humanistic worldview has been a long one. While the concept of a benevolent and involved personal deity did not make sense to me, only reading the Bible from cover to cover and the subsequent reading of the pantheon of atheist and secular greats helped to solidify my views as a humanist. The contradictions, inconsistencies, fallacies, later additions, and the execrable behavior evidenced in the good book were enough to push me to a secular view. But what impact has the life stance had on my behavior personally and psychologically? While there may be subconscious effects of which I am unaware, the impacts of which I'm aware can be distilled in the statement, we must help each other as there is no one else to help us. A former fundamentalist minister put it succinctly when he said that the only way he could love everybody was by becoming an atheist. A secular worldview has caused me to be more liberal in my political views. We are all told early on that we shouldn't discuss religion and politics. But after becoming an atheist humanist, I've found that those are the main topics about which I want to engage with other folks. My wife has even referred to me as a fundamentalist atheist humanist. These are the basic issues of our existence. Atheism is what I believe. Human is what, however poorly, I try to practice. Humanism has caused me to be more conscious of the need to be compassionate and empathetic as we are all struggling with issues, concerns, and problems. With humanism, I'm strong enough to battle internally and many times overcome visceral negative reactions that I might justify if I were a religious person. Reading, discussing, and thinking about this worldview has only instantiated, many times over, the view that atheism, humanism comports more closely to reality, the hard ontology of reality, than any other life stance of which I'm aware. My views are, to the limit of my intellectual ability, based upon the foundations of philosophy and logic, history, and science. And here I admit to not having studied religions other than Christianity. These foundations are not fully refined or articulated, but I can give you some snippets of them. The biblical hagiographs, the four Gospels, just don't provide good evidence of the claims they make. There could have been contemporaneous records instead of the canonical Gospels being written by multiple hearsay testimony some 40 to 70 years after the events they portray. Many more folks should have seen Jesus, who was later claimed by humans to have been one of the three emanations of the Godhead. Jesus could have appeared all over the globe instead of just one tiny area to a select few. Why is all the work of spreading the gospel left to humans? This is called the problem of hiddenness. Every tribe and civilization throughout history has had its creation stories and divine entities. Why is Christianity the only true one? John 17, verses 21 through 23 says that if all believers are united in one body, then that shows the truth of Christianity. We have in this country over 3,000 Christian sects, denominations, and tribes, many of which have some very strange beliefs. 8 billion of us live on a tiny speck of dust revolving around an average star on the outskirts of an average galaxy in an infinite universe filled with billions of galaxies and trillions or quadrillions of planets. Yet 2,000 years after the earthly sojourn of the divine Son of God, only about 1/3 of the population on this tiny speck of dust are considered Christian. Is the creator of the cosmos that ineffectual? And why does this perfect deity need us to worship him, her, or it? We are less than what a bacterium is to us, as we would be to the Godhead. For over 100 years after his life, there is no mention of Jesus in historical reports outside of the stories creating the religion about him, with only two minor exceptions. The lack of efficacy of prayer has been noted in double-blind scientific studies. Science has shown that there is a natural reason for every phenomenon yet discerned. There is the problem and evil and doctrine of Humanism, both of which take too much time to go into here, but if you're interested, I'd be happy to discuss those with you individually. I can say that I do differ from Trude's statement that a secular worldview has caused her to be focused in her life. My secular bumper sticker would say, stay unfocused. Life is a smorgasbord, and I want to taste a bit of this and that, but I don't want to stop one place in the line and load my plate with only one type of food for thought. Thus, humanism has allowed me to engage in a myriad of different activities, hobbies, avocations, and interests during my 75 years of life. May it continue for a respectable encore into the future. Thank you, and namaste.
Last one. Battery? You need a battery? Okay. So, good morning. Still another 30 minutes to go of the morning. Here's a question I would like to invite you to consider. Who developed the concept of the scientific method? Another question, what has been the impact of the scientific method on the way you and I function in today's modern world? And a third question, how has the scientific method changed the way we think about philosophical ideas like religion and humanism? When I was first inspired by the scientific method in high school, it seemed like the coolest idea. You come up with a question about how something works, and there were many. You develop a hypothesis that explains how that works, and then you develop a way to test your hypothesis and prove that it is wrong. What an amazing idea. It was so cool to think about. You could deal with chemistry or biology or cosmology and ask these questions and try to find out why the answer you came up with was wrong. So, who came up with the world-changing idea of the scientific method? Anybody know? Oh, good. You learned something new today. The first person to actually articulate this idea was an ancient Greek philosopher, and most of you would recognize the name Aristotle. Unfortunately, Aristotle lived at a time long before the printing press was invented, so his conception of the scientific method didn't get to the average person in the 4th century BC. It wasn't until the 1600s that a British statesman and philosopher named Francis Bacon took up the idea and began to promote it. He wrote dozens of essays on a wide range of topics. He was very much a fan of questioning everything. That's what I liked about him then, and I still do. This sense of the importance of questioning and testing ideas has been with me since those high school days. That's what brought me to Unitarian Universalism almost 50 years ago. After a few visits to a UU church in Atlanta, I realized that UUs were my people. You are my people. At that time in my life, I had come to the hypothesis that there was no need for a God to have created the universe, and despite my best efforts to prove that I was wrong, I finally concluded that based on my understanding, which was and is subject to change, if I find new evidence, I'll change my mind. I am an atheist. Along the way, the last 50 years, I've also discovered humanism. Since the time of the Renaissance, Western thought has increasingly focused on how humans can live together in peace and harmony. One of the greatest inventions we humans have ever developed is the city. Yes, the city. We evolved as a species to the point that we could live in very close proximity and in very large numbers. This was only a few thousand years ago that we started living this way. Today, just over half of all humans, the 8 billion that Mark referenced, over half live in cities now. And for the most part, we don't kill each other. How did this happen? Well, our ancestors learned that by working together, specializing in the work we do, and sharing responsibilities for the common good, life can be a very positive experience. Religion helped to bind people together, and of course, our ancient ancestors mostly believed whatever everybody else in their tribe believed. But there were always free thinkers who didn't go along with the crowd. By the mid-20th century, a movement toward humanism was well established by 1933. A group of humanist thinkers developed a set of principles that summarized the humanist ideals of the day. It was titled the Humanist Manifesto and was signed by 34 people. Many of them, 34 people, many of them were Unitarian Universalist ministers. The famous educational reformer John Dewey was one of those signatories. The manifesto was actually revised and updated in 1973. This became Humanist Manifesto 2. Within the last couple of weeks, I had the opportunity to visit with one of the signers of the second edition, Ed Erickson. Ed has spoken here numerous times over the years. He recently celebrated his 94th birthday. He and his wife Carol live in Dunedin, not far from where he grew up. In addition to being a former UU minister, he was for many years president of the American Ethical Union. He is author of several books, including one titled The Humanist Way. So I had to go talk to him before this talk today. And I have the greatest respect for his understanding and his knowledge of history. I'm deeply honored to consider him my friend. Ed's recollection is that the first manifesto really did put humanism on the map. It led to the formation in 1941 of the American Humanist Association, of which our UUC Humanist Group is an affiliate. We are also affiliated with the UU Humanist Association. The second manifesto, according to Ed, was not nearly as optimistic as the first one had been. A lot had happened between 1933 and 1973. The Great Depression, World War II, Vietnam had all taken their toll. By 2003, another version was developed. This is now known as Humanist Manifesto 3. Here is its opening paragraph. Humanism is a progressive philosophy of life that, without supernaturalism, affirms our ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the greater good of humanity. And here is the first principle of the third manifesto. Knowledge of the world is derived by observation, experimentation, and rational analysis. Humanists find that science is the best method for determining this knowledge as well as for solving problems and developing beneficial technologies. We also recognize the value of new departures in thought, the arts, and inner experience, each subject to analysis by critical intelligence. And in its closing, Humanist Manifesto 3 summarizes my own personal worldview, and I hope it is one that I share with all UUs. Humanists are concerned for the well-being of all, are committed to diversity, and respect those of differing yet humane views. We work to uphold the equal enjoyment of human rights and civil liberties in an open, secular society and maintain in it as a civic duty to participate in the democratic process and a planetary duty to protect nature's integrity, diversity, and beauty in a secure, sustainable manner. Thus engaged in the flow of life, we aspire to this vision with the informed conviction that humanity has the ability to progress toward its highest ideals. The responsibility for our lives and the kind of world in which we live is ours and ours alone. Thank you.